We are tracking breaking news out of Florida this afternoon. Two key midterm races are now headed for a recount. Laura McQuillan is watching that story for us. So Laura, what do we know at this stage?
We know there will be machine recounts in both the senators and governors races, those really tight races that have been very controversial up to this point. Now that recount is due by 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, and the margins are still incredibly close right now after the unofficial vote tallies were put forward by officials in Florida earlier today. Now, I want to walk you through some of the results that we're seeing at this point. The Senate race, let's begin there. The state's current governor, Rick Scott, is leading just very narrowly, as you can see there, by 0.15% over the incumbent Bill Nelson. And in the governor's race, the Republican candidate Ron DeSantis leads Democrat Andrew Gillum by just 0.41%, so very narrow still. Now, Gillum actually conceded on election night, and a short time ago he walked back that concession. Here's what he said.
I am replacing my words of concession with an uncompromised and unapologetic call that we count every single vote. We count every vote. I've got to imagine that if the shoe were on the other foot of my opponents, not one of them would seek a different outcome. Not one of them would stand in the way of counting every vote.
So a machine recount this week due by Thursday. If that is still narrow, we could see manual recounts by hand. And even after that, there's potential for legal action, which we have seen before over those Florida results. So we'll be keeping a close eye on what does come out this week, Natasha.
So Laura, even before this recount, some of these races were incredibly controversial. What are you hearing out of Florida?
That's right. So, for instance, the two Senate candidates I was just speaking about are both suing over the vote counting process, and there have been allegations from Republicans of election fraud. Now, those have come from both Rick Scott, the challenger there for the Senate, and from Donald Trump, but they haven't provided any evidence to back up those fraud claims. However, there are questions being asked about votes in one county, that's Broward County. It was also central to that 2000 presidential election recount. And in Broward County, questions are being asked about some of the ballots. 25,000 ballots actually had fewer votes for the Senate than for governor. So people are wondering, why did people only vote in one of these races? And it does look unusual when you look across the state. There were much more similar numbers in other areas. So certainly a close examination of Broward County. But today we did hear the lawyer for its election supervisor hitting back at any claims of fraud. Here's what he said a short time ago.
There have been allegations of fraud. Those are serious charges to recklessly offer out there. There's no basis for it. To give a claim of fraud without any evidence, I think is unacceptable, should be unacceptable in our electoral process. The votes have all been counted. The votes have been transmitted to the state.
And those votes, of course, now part of this recount, which we will be watching for later this week.